The issue is that as a society, we put women under a different magnifying lens. What you can get away with, Andrew, is certainly what we couldn't. And then it's even a different lens for people who come from other populations, ethnically, culturally. You said, well, if we don't have enough experience. Wait, hold up. So we're not going to include all the years we spent in dental hygiene school, all the years we've been doing clinical practice, the degrees that we may have. We often think, well, I've only been speaking this year, but what about all the stuff that happened before? All of that is the value that you bring into your speaking.
We all have knowledge. We all have important things to say. We're all going to learn from each other. And by living in a scarcity mindset, we're depriving ourselves of other people's voices.
Get ready for your unofficial dental hygiene podcast. These are the tales of two hygienists, one East Coast RDH and one West Coast hygienist. Listen as they tackle the profession of dental hygiene with humor and enthusiasm. Now, please join Michelle Strange and Andrew Johnston as they tell you a tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists, episode number 302. My name is Andrew.
Woo! And this is Michelle. Welcome to the podcast. I am really excited for this episode.
This is a good one. Well, I mean, they're both good ones.
It's a two-parter, guys, too, just so you know. Mm-hmm. Heads up. Go ahead. You had something to say.
Oh, no, I was just saying, and it's multiple. It's 2 episodes. So, yeah.
It is. It's pretty great. So, and I won't get in it too just yet because we just came back from ADA. Mm-hmm. In Vegas. Man, I just don't know how I ever, at the rate that I was doing it in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, flying and jumping from time zones and coming back and getting my life together. Good Lord.
Well,
I must have had superpowers then. I don't know.
You had to have. It was always remarkable because the one time that I would do it, I'm like, this is death. And you're like, no, this is so easy, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I hate you so much for being able to do it so much. And let's check in though with you, because remember, the last couple of conferences, you come home being a little bit worn out, sicky, kind of not good.
Oh, yeah. I am okay, I think. I did my clear nose spray more frequently this time. I pretty much stayed masked up the whole time, did all my hand hygiene. So far, I'm pretty good. Tired, yes, but not ill. I have come away with the fact that people are incapable of washing their hands appropriately. For sure. And so I have an idea that I would like somebody in the world to create. I come up with these ideas all the time, but I don't have the time or bandwidth to actually see them come to fruition. So I just want to give them to others, and then you make them. My idea is it could go anyway, but I think the soap dispenser should have just enough water in it so that you can put your hand under there and have it to lather. But from the moment that soap dispenser gives out the soap, you cannot turn on the water for 20 seconds.
and actually, let me ask this. Do you have to get your hands wet first? Are you at hands wet, then soap, and then rinse? Or are you just let's go to soap?
Well, if it's an automatic dispenser, I have one hand under the water and one hand under this dispenser, and then I put them together and lather up. But I feel like it's hard just to lather without a little moisture.
I mean, if they put a little bit of extra water in that foam or whatever it ends up dispensing, that way, and then the water doesn't turn on unless you've used the soap, then that's going to make you do it. I love it.
Yeah. And I know that creates some other problems. If you ever just needed a little bit of water. Sorry. Anything else that happens in the bathroom, there has to be a soap first. And you have to wait 20 seconds because people are just incapable of washing their hands properly.
What other situations would you just need water on though that you couldn't do, where they have the water fountains and then where you fill up your water bottle, that space? I'm thinking of the airport, of course, but
let me try to think. I don't know. Maybe I got something on my shirt and just wanted to wet my finger, wet a paper towel and wipe it off, something weird, random like that, not around hygiene specifically. I mean, I'm sure there's some instances, especially for women, but yeah, you just got to wait 20 seconds after the soap goes.
Love it.
I'm just amazed that people are not able. And then, you know, because back in 2000, we probably thought in 2021 that this would already be a thing, but it's not. One day when we are able to have like holograms in the mirror, then people would be doing the hand washing technique and you would be following along. Because I'm telling you, people are incapable.
I like it.
I just sat and watched them in all the bathrooms and I'm like, yeah, this is why we're sick. Ugh. All right. So that's my rant.
I love it. I think that makes a lot of sense. I've told you guys for years on this podcast about how disgusting the men are and how they just go in and they rinse off only a few fingers on the one hand, and that's all they do. It's so ridiculous.
Oh, it is so ridiculous.
But I did carry around my little hand sanitizer spray that you gave me from when you were over here, and that box that you gave me is about half gone now.
You have an interesting obsession with hand sanitizer.
Well, with that very specific hand sanitizer, yes.
That's true. But, anything else? What's happening with you?
So get this. So right after, I landed at 11:41 p.m. coming from ADA. The next morning, I had a 7:15 flight to go to St. Louis for the Perio Protect.
Oh my God, you were living my life.
Buddy, it was.
What the heck,
Well, and
man?
this is why, like before all the listeners were like, hey, dum-dum, just get a different like direct flight from one spot to another.
Right.
The problem was we weren't going to go to the Perio Protect seminar until way after we booked the ADA stuff. And so to get everything rearranged was just going to be a nightmare. But so we went there. It was St. Louis. It was 2 days. The first day, oh my gosh, phenomenally packed with great information. The second day was also good, but it was more of like implementation. And so you didn't really learn as much about the sciences. Now, I'm not going to blow like all of their information out and into this one little intro, but I will say the way that they thought about the pathogens from 10 or 15 years ago until even just 5 years ago and then till today, and specifically the types of the bacteria that have caused diseases has changed multiple times. And there's a new theory out there that I think is interesting, that if it's true, I mean, we just need to have them on and have them explain it way better than I could ever come close to, because I can't remember all the, PG and AA and all these different ones. But it was very, very fascinating what they were talking about. And so they have like this laboratory that does like this saliva testing, right, for all of them. And then they have all these graphs that they were showing, and they're talking about like if you're just rinsing and spitting versus just taking like a micropipette and like going into the sulcus and then taking the things out. And oh my gosh, it was just so fascinating. It's probably the first CE course that I took that was just purely just to learn in a long time. Like we usually have an angle. Maybe you don't, but maybe I do.
Right.
Where I'm like, okay, now how am I going to get this information into someone else's brain? Like I'm figuring out how to transfer the information over rather than just taking it in just for me. And so it felt really nice to be in that kind of a CE class again.
Ah, that's nice. Yeah. But I mean, what you're saying right now is exactly why we created this podcast. Because science is a moving target. Our industry is ever changing and evolving. And if you are still working with the same knowledge and scientific information from when you graduated or even 5 years ago, you are not doing right by your patient. You are not going to probably get the best outcomes, and you're probably going to get exhausted and burned out, because life's a little easier when you are staying current with the information. Sure. But wow, that sounds great. I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah, you should be.
I am. Well, this week we are talking about KOLs, or key opinion leaders. This was kind of a raw, open conversation. We really wanted to be open and honest. It's like we said at the beginning, it's a two-parter. We have a few of us on the first one, and then we brought more people on for the second one. If you have questions and you want to hear more after this, let us know. Because, I mean, this is what we were built for, is these really big, hard, and honest conversations. And so enjoy this episode, this version with Jasmin Haley and Eden Ivie.
Before we get to the interview, we want to say a big thank you to Paradise Dental Technologies, or PDT, for supporting the continuing education portion of this podcast for so many years. If you do not know already, many of our full-length episodes count for CE. You'll find the links in the show notes, or you can sign up for our newsletter by going to atale2hygienist.com. When you sign up for the newsletter, we will periodically send out links to shows that have expiring CE courses attached. And none of this could be possible without the support of the amazing people over at PDT. So check out their hygiene and other instruments at pdtdental.com. That's pdtdental.com. Now, on to the interview. All right, welcome everyone into the interview portion of this podcast. We're so excited because, today we're going to do part one of a KOL discussion. And one of the things I'm really excited about for this one is it's going to be comprehensive. It's going to be some real discussion about the experiences of being a KOL and some things to think about, some things to look out for. And so we have on today Jasmin Haley and Eden Ivie. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so I think...
And I would add real talk. Some real talk about the industry.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this. This is what fuels my fire for this podcast, is some real talk. It's the conversations, Michelle, we've talked about this before, but it's conversations that when we're sitting at a conference, all the four of us, and we're talking about the things that are happening, like for reals, now you listeners get to really hear it. And it's not going to be behind the closed doors, the secrets and the whispers that are happening. Like it needs to be shared. It needs to be out there. So, and I think Jasmin, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think, when we're collaborating on this particular episode, this really speaks to you, this particular topic.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And I wish that this conversation could have been had many years ago. I feel like there could have been more changes, but we also know that generationally, our generation versus those who have been in the industry for 40 plus years was way different. And so I think that this conversation is going to hold people's feet to the fire and really make it very clear that we can do better. There's some wonderful things in our industry, but we also need to consider what's not so great, because that's the only way we're going to be able to grow and evolve.
Mm-hmm. Some real honest conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, time.
So I think we should start into talking about why we're sharing our voice. I think that this can be a measure of inspiration for those who have thought about it for some time. And I would love to know from Eden, Michelle, and of course I'll share, why did you go out there, put yourself out there, get vulnerable, and share your message from the stage?
Okay, so for me, it doesn't even feel like that noble of a cause. I wanted to educate people about teledentistry. It was new. The industry didn't understand it. They didn't understand the power. And to some extent, they still don't understand the power of what teledentistry can do. And I feel so strongly about teledentistry being able to finally move the needle on the oral health of our country and improve it, that it was worth getting over my stage fright to get up and teach people about this technology and help them understand how they can use it.
Yeah, and I would say mine always comes from a place of learning something, being taught something I didn't know, and looking at the people around me and them maybe not knowing and being like, what? We can't all not know this. Like, let me go tell the people. Hence this podcast. But mine started with my master's thesis, which was all around oral care for critically ill patients in the ICU. So I, wrote about that, published that, and really got into home care and home care products and how do we help manage these people in the hospital and then as they go home, and the role of a hygienist being bigger than just private practice. And that's when I started working with Tepe, and then slowly got a platform just out of necessity of being the educator and needing to talk about some things. But it all just came from my love for teaching other people really cool things that I learn. and wanting everyone to know the same thing so that we don't have disparities, so that the information is disseminated to all and there is no question. Like, I don't care where you land in this industry, if it's like small town Wisconsin that I just came from versus like Chicago, like we're all hearing it so that we can take care of our patients the same way.
So I think my pull was twofold. I've always loved educating and have done it for several years, was a full-time educator. But after getting burnt out in a toxic work environment, I didn't know what else I could do. I needed to be able to use my God-given talents, and education and speaking has always been one of them. So that gave me a little bit of interest of getting on the stage. And at that point in time, I was volunteering at a nonprofit organization, and I was seeing other speakers get on the stage, and I was like, oh, I can do something like that. I would love that. But also, as a person that was helping with the selection of speakers, it was like a big red flag to me that there was no diversity of thought at all. It's the same people you see on the national stages as you would see at the constituent or local level. None of them represented any marginalized populations ever, okay? Or in my age group. So I was like, what is going on? Let me go out there and be able to share my message. So it was twofold of a fire desire to make a sustainable source of income after leaving my job and leaving that toxic work environment, using what my gifts and talents were, but also understanding it's almost a burden too, that there need to be more diversity of thought with writing articles and even speaking on stages. And I wanted to be a part of that change.
I have an interesting thought process that just popped up just now, because, and I'm sorry, this is going to be not on our outline, but as you guys were talking about your whys, and I don't really talk about myself as a speaker, but I used to speak, forever ago. It would have crossed my mind to think, oh, I need to be nervous because I look a certain way, or I need to be aware of a certain degrees or credentials or ability. And Jasmin, from what I hear from you, obviously you're very aware of it. You're like, hey, I need to change all of this. But maybe for Michelle and Eden, was that when you're preparing and you're like, I have this why of why I want to speak, were you like, oh, but by the way, I have to be conscious of this other thing? Would that even come into your brain now, or is that much later once you started seeing things?
You mean the way you look, your credentials, all of those things? Oh, I was 100% conscious of that, which is part of why I was so nervous. I mean, I had only spoken a few times at smaller things, like when I was finishing my degree, and at small local things. And then I was supposed to speak at NOAA to all of these public health professionals. I was like, I don't have a public health credential. And picking out an outfit was almost killed me. It has to it has to be pretty, but it has to be professional. You have to look good, but not too good. I definitely thought about all of that.
Yeah, I think I've told this story before, but when I had long hair like I do now before I got on the stage, and I cut all of it off because I did not want to be seen as unprofessional. I wanted to be seen as streamlined and I know my science and I'm here to tell you the science. And I had a lot of insecurity around being seen as a booth babe or just another hygienist, oh, isn't she cute? And not bringing the actual knowledge and research. I had a lot of insecurity around being a hygienist on a stage because I started speaking at implant conferences with surgeons and with a real big elitist kind of mindset there. So that was definitely playing in the back of my head. I also was having some other hygienists in the background because I was from South Carolina speaking in California and what could I possibly know as a little bumpkin from South Carolina in there talking to California Hygienists. There was like a lot of that, but mine was a very self-centered mindset as far as like, how do I look and how am I presenting myself? I did not look up on the stage and be like, oh, there's no women of color up here. There's just a bunch of white women. I at that time did not have that mindset, mostly because I was wrapped up in my self-centered like insecurities. Like I have to deal with all of the things that my little mind is struggling with, and thank God I got past that and then started noticing the disparities up there.
I think that's interesting because it doesn't matter what industry that you're in, all of us women deal with the same type of thinking. And it's even more intriguing to think about how men consider the same tasks that we do. And as Andrew mentioned, it didn't even cross his mind. You know, when I think about my husband, this is one of the things that we've talked about a couple of years ago. When he was applying for a job, he didn't care whether or not he had all the credentials. He didn't check every box. He applied.
Let's just see what happens.
Yeah. And so he was like, he said, Jasmin, just apply. Right. So now, like when I put in my speaker application, I don't care what the topic is. It's about truckers. You're going to get my presentation. Okay. But it's like the mentality is so it's very, very different but the issue is that as a society, we put women under a different magnifying lens. What you can get away with, Andrew, is certainly what we couldn't. And then it's even a different lens for people who come from other populations, ethnically, culturally. So there are some layers that we have to acknowledge that we may not have control over. And until we have the difficult conversations, which I'm hoping that we'll have today, it will start the event organizers or the decision makers in our industry to challenge the status quo a bit on how we determine what is right and what's not for sharing expertise from the stage.
It's such an interesting thing because like my why honestly wasn't very much different than like all of your why. My why and my like one of my biggest like favorite topics to teach was essentially like how can you do humanitarian dentistry, and in which bucket do you do it from? Do you do it from an education point? Do you do it from a religious point? Do you do it from this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, traveling, whatever? And then how do you actualize that? So, I mean, it was very short, but it was very near and dear to me. I had a why I wanted to share. I want people to get more, healthcare throughout the world. And, but when we go into the things that could derail my why, like I'm not going up on the stage or I'm not hearing from these organizers and being like, you know what? When we look at him, there's just something about him that we don't like. It's just that wasn't a thing that I would ever think about. Like, you don't like me because of my content. That's why you don't like me. There couldn't be anything possible out there other than that. Anyways, it's the
way you dress, the slacks or the pants that you chose,
or your hair,
your hair, how all of that is. Yeah, that leads before. For women, I believe that leads before anything else.
It's ingrained even in dental hygiene school. I was told, you can't wear a certain type of earrings. The makeup for males, it was like, just make sure you're clean. For women, they nitpicked off of everything that we had on us. And I remember specifically one of my friends wore a pair of earrings that were more kind of like ethnic for our class picture, and our faculty member was highly upset and made it known she was upset for the earring choice that she chose for our class picture. So as a Black woman, she's experiencing that in a predominantly white area. Ethnically, that would have been acceptable in her community. We're here in the mountains of Maryland, and it wasn't. So those are things that deep-seated things that we make memory of in our brain and say, okay, well, I got to make sure I acclimate. I used to feel like I always had to have my hair straight instead of having it as a fro. I'll give you a case in point. I went to go speak in Kansas. I'm professionally dressed. I'm the only speaker. You see the flyer, okay? You see my face, okay? Someone still walked up to me and thought I was a hotel employee.
No.
As I was setting myself up to speak. So now, of course, that didn't deter me of sharing my message, but they were the sponsor of that event. Do you get what I'm saying? So
I can't.
When you have situations like that show up, and of course they're well-intentioned. I'm not saying that they were not well-intentioned, but when you have things like that happen over and over again, whether you are a female coming into a predominantly male area, or whether you are a person of color coming into an area where you are not the majority, those small little microaggressions show up in many different ways, and we internalize it, which leaves many of us afraid to share our voice. And one of the things we talked about at the diversity panel that we had at a recent conference in July was that there is a burden often placed on minorities. So for me, when I decided to kind of leave out of the industry because of some barriers, I felt like it's not my fight any longer. I was told from others, we need you. We need to see your voice. We love what you represented. We need you to be a part of the industry. I would get those comments all the time. And then all of a sudden the burden of, well, not my piece, but what I mentioned before, the overarching goal of seeing more diverse thinkers started placing a big, weight on my shoulders. So I think that there is that layer that no one will truly understand. And unfortunately, some of us will deal with harmful things because of that.
Yeah. And we talk about this a lot as far as at least I hope a lot of people are talking about this, that it is not on the shoulders of women of color. It's not your labor anymore. We should be making the efforts to make sure that you do feel included, because your message is so important and so in a way to make you want to stay, because we need you to stay. We need to be making the efforts of making sure that you feel included, that you feel wanted there, and that you don't have those barriers.
I have comments on the words feelings on that. I know what you're saying, and I don't mean to play the semantics police. I don't care how Jasmin feels. I mean, I do, but I don't care if she feels included. She just needs to be included. It's more of a matter of fact. And that's maybe my little, my brain is in a situation where I'm I can only see one thing. I don't assume anything. Jasmin, women of color,
you might
yeah, they need to feel also included, but they also just need to be included, whether that comes from the organizers, from the conference, or fellow speakers, or audience members, or whoever it is that is dictating what we are consuming from our KOLs. It just needs to be it's a no-brainer. This is the topic that we want. This is the person for it. I'm having a harder time with the feelings part of it. And feel free to argue with me, because
I think Eden and I are there for that. Eden, go ahead.
So I wanted to go back to that panel in July because, Jasmin, we saw that happen real time, where one of the panelists, she got really vulnerable, and she talked about how hard she had worked and all of the things she had done for this diversity and inclusion in her state association. And then her abstract was not accepted to speak. The organizers told her, oh, you can do a lunch and learn, but you have to pay to come to the event, and treated her terribly. And she was up there saying, what am I supposed to do? I can't do this anymore. And a white woman stood up and said, you have to go back. You have to go back. You can't leave the organization. You have to go back and do the work. It's so important. And I was like, no, that's not her job. She's been working her ass off. It's our job. Why are we not going to the leadership and saying, why are you doing this? Why are you treating her so poorly when she's been working so hard for you? It was really interesting to see that happen real time, Jasmin, to see that that Black woman who had worked so hard and had all of that labor say, I don't want to do this anymore. This is too hard. And giving it to the audience, help me. And that woman putting it right back on her shoulders. At least that's how I interpreted it. I know that you were there as well, so I'd love to hear how you interpreted that situation. Is that what you saw? Because I have a different perspective, obviously.
I think the response was a twofold response of another issue that had occurred where, unfortunately, for women and for speakers, we're held at a tighter standard. And so it was a combination of multiple things. When you are raised in a world where you're told that you aren't good enough or professional enough to represent whatever it is that you're representing, that leads to emotional breakdowns like that. And I'll give you an example without identifying marks here, but I have spoken to professionals who have businesses inside of the industry, who have walked into places to secure work in the industry, and they were turned down. They then hired a majority employee that looks like Michelle or Eden, went back to the same location, same work, same proposal, and they were accepted. The proposal was a yes. Same company. They just decided to hire someone that looked different to come in. So what we have to understand is that we have no control over biases. We have no control over that. But for places where we can have a voice, if we're putting our money into certain conferences and organizations, we need to take a stand collectively. I think that this is a thing that we have to talk about as a group, not just for marginalized populations, though. I'm talking about also from my RDH sisters who are of the majority, because y'all are dealing with stuff too. It's a good old boys club that's running things. And unfortunately, we all are suffering in silence and not sharing. And I've had plenty of conversations with other KOLs who are of the majority, who are frustrated from years and years and years of doing research and the hours and never being compensated and still struggling with getting their voice out there and staying out there. So I feel that, that episode was from multiple layers. At some point you get tired, whether you're from the majority or a minority, you just get tired. I got tired, y'all. Mm-hmm. I got tired. Yeah. And so I feel, again, that unless you are walking in the shoes of others or having conversations or breaking bread like how we are right now, this will never come across your mind. Just like how you mentioned, it will never come across your mind.
And just to call back to the feelings of inclusion, for me, I feel like whoever you're trying to include should feel included, because it is bigger than just saying they've been invited. We asked them to come. Like they should be here. Like we have them, they're present. But if they don't feel like they can say the words, if they don't feel, and I'll speak only from my lens of sexual harassment and feeling like the cute girl, mm-hmm. right? Like, if I am invited to a big panel with a bunch of men, I'm included as a woman, but do I feel like I have the ability to have a voice? Because when I get off of that, I might be gaslit, or I might be,
that's good.
Maybe I was sexually harassed, and that happened. And we don't even have the time to talk about the sexual harassment in our industry. And it kind of goes both ways because women have internalized that and behave certain ways. And I've been absolutely guilty of that too. Just to feel like I have the power in the situation because men have taught us that's how you have the power, right? Like this is what you do with the power. Not all men, Andrew, but definitely a lot of men at the top.
Sure.
So like I think you have to make sure that people feel included, even though feelings it's like, this is work, this is business, this is research, this is important discussions. But if you're not making sure that they feel okay there, they feel wanted, they feel included, and they feel safe, then there's no point in actually inviting them, I think.
So
maybe I'm wrong.
As always, you're one step ahead of where my brain is at. And so what you're saying here is different than when I heard the first time. And that's why I kind of wanted to bring it back one more time where
that's good.
I don't want to put the horse before the cart, right? I don't want, okay, let's make a loving, kind environment, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then everyone feel all sorts of things. No. That's backwards. Like we need to get the right people in the right places. And then also concurrently make sure that like you said, like that when they're there present, ready to deliver, they feel the included part, like it's genuine and real. I don't know if we're ready to move into this, but like I'm also very curious, Jasmin, because you said a couple of things that I want to talk about. So getting the job is one thing that we have to look at, but there's so many other areas of like despair. Like there's so many other areas that are unfair or unequal in the industry. And I was wondering if we could maybe like identify a few of them and talk about a few of them.
So the thing is that, some people may hear, those people that have known me for a while, they're like, man, everybody knows Beyond the Prophy. Everybody knows Jasmin Haley, right? I'm not worried so much for me. Jasmin's going to be okay. But we're talking about the other people that are coming up behind. And I am finding, and I have seen, and I've heard, and I don't know if this is the same for you, just like when we talked about in that diversity panel, there's still some barriers that people are facing, even if they're good. And y'all know, some of y'all that have heard me speak, I am thebomb.com when I'm presenting.
Oh my God.
Yes, ma'am.
The best.
Oh, thank you. But even then, that still wasn't good enough. It still wasn't good enough to get the contracts that you would love to have. Or you find out that the contracts are way less than what your contemporary is receiving. I mean, dramatically less. That hurts. It hurts a lot. So I think the first step is there's something Michelle said about the gaslighting part. I feel like we do that a ton. Oh, well, that was just the times. Oh, that was because of, no, the behavior decisions and what's happening is not acceptable. And when are we together collectively going to say it's not? So
yeah, because we accept it and are quiet, that's why it continues. Well, and our message is, it was the times, or that was 5 years ago. Oh, we should give them a pass versus like, this has always been really unacceptable. It's sad that people felt it was okay. And I'm really glad that we're making some changes. Yeah. Like it should be like, we're moving forward. That was garbage back then. I'm glad that we're making changes versus like, oh, like it's okay. Like they didn't know any better. Yeah. You know how many times I've heard. It still doesn't make it right. Exactly. It doesn't make it right. I've heard so many times, well, it's just because you were like the very first one that really started out there speaking. Doesn't mean that it's not right. It doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean that it's not traumatic. It doesn't mean that it doesn't get embedded, internalized into my psyche. So when we're looking at things that are happening, when are we going to say like, and when are we going to say enough is enough for everyone, not just people of color? I don't want to make it just for people of color because as women, we are silent.
And we take what we're given and say thank you.
Exactly.
With a smile.
Yeah, thank you for these pennies that you have offered on the very hard work that I've brought to you. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, just last year when George Floyd was murdered, I was contacted and I was asked to do a couple of presentations
And I felt that the price that they were asking was too low for the amount of work that they were requiring. And in just that instance of me standing up for myself and saying, hey, can you, and it wasn't a huge margin difference. This is what I would like to receive. The answer was no. The answer was no. And these are relationships that you build over time where you may have been given peanuts, right? Some sponsors at that time when I started were given like $100, $120 or $100 to $200 for a 3-hour course.
Oh my God.
Oh, what?
So I already know just from having other discussions with my other KOL friends that wasn't the norm. But yet that's what I was offered because my market value isn't as valuable as others. Now, who's to say if that's not because I'm not writing enough articles or what it is that I have to offer it. I try not to go the ethnicity route, but it just doesn't quite make sense when you start piecing things together. Why isn't there an equitable compensation rate and opportunity for these amazing professionals that I know of all throughout the industry? I'm not the only one.
I feel like too, I think everybody on this stage has no problem pushing the envelope for change, right? And if in our industry, we're not known for being progressive, we are not known for making change and movement, changing up how we approach patient care, reading the research and applying it soon after. We are not known for that. And so if we are talking up there on the stage, if you are a KOL, if you're writing articles, even though everybody likes a little bit of a pot stir, they don't want you making too many waves, right?
That's true.
So like if you are challenging the status quo, if you are giving them what maybe feels like more than they asked
Too
for,
much change. Yeah.
too much change, you're chastised for that. You are penalized for that in a way. So maybe you might, and Jasmine's got the big, like, I mean, you're talking about hard things. Eden's even talking about teledentistry. People like, what? We can't do that. Like we're hands-on profession. I mean, how many years have we been talking about teledentistry? Like it's ridiculous. So I feel like that factors in, because if you are out there trying to make change and you are out there to say big things and you do finally get a platform, then you can be penalized because they feel like your message is too strong, too much, too fast.
I wanted to ask Jasmin about this, and this will make Andrew happy because Andrew really wants us to talk about compensation.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
I know when I started, I did lots for free. And part of it was starting out, like when I was finishing my degree, I was speaking at like a WIC clinic about nutrition, or at a senior care facility about home care, at a local component, where we work for free, or I know Michelle has, Jasmin, I'm sure you have as well, or for pennies. Now, to some extent, you have to practice and get good and build some experience and build your CV. And there's going to be a range of pay based on experience, based on the content of your presentation. And I know when we're speaking on these bigger stages, the compensation is much higher. But what would you say to somebody who's starting out, who's going to speak at a local component, who doesn't have a lot of money? Like, what is fair compensation for a newbie?
My rule of thumb is to ask what their budget is.
Oh, you're so smart.
So I would ask their budget first. And know that there are compensation for you that may not be monetary. So say, for instance, we'll just say hypothetical, your compensation rate is $3,500. And they say, the local component says, we only have $500. Cool. What can you provide for me that's of value worth $3,000?
Yeah.
The list.
Email list.
Okay. What else can you marketing me on your platform? Like, there's so many other things that we can put into it. We have to advocate for ourselves. So I always start with asking for the budget first. And another thing I want to just say, one of the things that you said was, and this is a problem with women, okay, not just in our industry, we got some issues we need to work through. You just said, Eden, and that also shows where you need to make a mindset shift. Even for me, you said, well, if we don't have enough experience, wait, hold up. So we're not going to include all the years we spent in dental hygiene school, all the years we've been doing clinical practice, the degrees that we may have. We often think, well, I've only been speaking this year, but what about all the stuff that happened before? All of that is a value that you bring into your speaking. And I think that's the hard part for us as women. We feel like, I need one more certification course. I need this X, Y, and Z celebrity in my industry to say, oh, she's the bomb, for me to have any sort of value. And we have to understand, when we walk into the situation, when I walk into this room, when I show up on this podcast, anywhere I show up, I have value. I'm worthy and deserving of achieving any of my goals. And I had to figure that out in a hot mess journey. And to fully understand that, it makes you walk differently. It makes you understand that fundamentally nobody can take that away from you. So there are people that come in, and this is what has made some older KOLs upset. The young people come in, they're like, I want $1,500. And they're like, well, I was only paid $300, $200, $100, They're often like that. But at the end of the day, we have to consider the fact how much we've evolved. And as women, we need to ask for that value and add tax.
Yeah. And I think having conversations about compensation, because we've been trained to stay quiet about it and not tell how much we're making. I mean, and that's not just in our industry, that's in the world. We have been taught that it's unprofessional to talk about your wages, but that just gives the companies control, because if you don't know how much your counterpart is making, then you're not going to ask for as much as your counterpart. So I think kind of breaking those rules and talking to other speakers about it. I mean, I just had a conversation with a speaker a couple of weeks ago where we submitted an abstract together, and she's like, they want to know what our honorarium is. And I was like, well, I know for a fact that this speaker makes this much. And she's like, oh, we're asking for more. And so it totally changed, what we thought we were worth to know what somebody else is getting. We're like, oh, well, we're definitely worth that much.
Yeah. I want to give another tip here for those who are listening, who are staying. This is another gem. Okay. I was asked to speak at a dental conference, and their compensation for 6 hours. Who has spoken for 6 hours, y'all? Listen, it's hard.
No way.
For six,
you take a break. You take a lunch break and get back at it. It's crazy.
Their compensation for 6 hours was under $4,000.
Ugh.
Because I was an RDH.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is a big conversation.
So my next question was, how many people you have at this event? When they said it was thousands of people paying X, Y, and Z price, I was like, If I'm going to step out of my house, you have to compensate me for my time. I'm not going to speak for 6 hours, and you got to up the price. So there is a form of nervousness that happens where we feel like if we set up a boundary, there will be no other opportunities that will come. That may be true to some extent, but I'm telling you, oftentimes those people come back to me.
I feel like we're all a bunch of rule followers. Like inherently, we want to follow all of the the things that we're told that has to be the way as hygienists. And I think that's a definite detriment. Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say like how, my lens in the speaking world comes from lecturing in the same room with surgeons, like dental surgeons. I started off in the dental implant space, and I was literally told at a conference by a doctor that my message was good. It would be so great if everybody could hear it, because it was all about implant maintenance. And I talk about as auxiliary how critical it is for us to take that baton once the surgeon has placed all these things. They work so hard to make sure that they place everything perfectly and it heals and it thrives. And then we take that baton, but we're not given the tools to then make sure that continues to be successful. And the surgeon was like, we really need to hear that. And then the other doctor said, that will never be on the main podium. They won't hear from a RDH.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. And because 4 minutes earlier, they were like, we just don't understand why people don't bring more teams here. We want this to be a team thing. And I was like, well, there you go. We just discovered why. They don't even value their team as if they could bring anything to the table for them. They don't even care about educating them. And so hygienists are seen as lesser than, as if our message is less important.
Yep.
As if we aren't one of the legs of this three-legged stool that keeps the industry going. And that is incredibly frustrating and 100% needs to change.
Ooh, you said a word there. Because like when I was speaking in one state for a oral surgeon practice, and they often would have this session where they bring in other surgeons, and guess who had a heckler? They were like, what is an RDH over here speaking about opioid addiction?
Oh.
And guess what? He was an oral surgeon and one of the surgeons from the practice that hired me.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, what is an RDH here talking about opioid addiction? And I want to ask him, when was the last time you were out here on these streets talking to people who dealt with opioid addiction? Never. Okay? Because they went a hoity-toity area. So it's like, yes, there is it doesn't matter where you're from. RDHs are not seen as having buying power or the intellectual ability to be able to share from the stage. Therefore, our compensation is peanuts.
Is less.
And I mean, even if you have an RDH with a PhD, they're like having those three little letters, that RDH it just diminishes your what am I trying to say?
Value.
I was trying not to say value because it's bullshit. But
it is bullshit.
But yes. Because Sarah spoke at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and she purposely left RDH off of her name because she wanted people to listen to her. She needed these executives and these doctors to listen to her. And that RDH is a permission to dismiss. It's so wild. And I don't know how we change that in the industry, because it's totally the patriarchy and the hierarchy of the profession. And like the whole thing needs to be tossed up and rearranged.
Because if you really think about the industry as an RDH, I mean, I feel like it's way more pernicious in the patriarchy. It like trickles down so much because we are mostly women as hygienists. I mean, we have the male hygienist. We need to see more of the male hygienist in there in our industry, but we are mostly women. And so we are then put into the bucket of just the hygienist because we are just women.
This conversation is so good. And like, as I'm hearing like all of you share, we can go on and on and on about more stories, right? But this is the challenge that happens to each of us because we know that this is happening. We're not sharing it, right? And we haven't even gotten to the worst of the worst. This is just a highlight reel, okay?
Yeah, it is.
But it makes it really difficult for us to maintain our integrity and our values because some of us are we're itching to get exposure. We're itching to make something out of ourselves. We want to make a difference. And there's this peer pressure to kind of show up regardless of how well we're treated over and over and over and over again. So what would you say we should do with this newfound knowledge as we holding people's feet to the fire as influencers in the industry? What you gonna do, basically?
Well, my go-to is always be loud and messy.
That works about 50% of the time.
It might not be constructive, but I'm gonna tell somebody, and I'm gonna be loud about it. I think I'm also working on cleaning that up and making sure my message is constructive. It's not just yelling at people for not treating people properly. There's some action items in there. But I think just having this conversation everywhere I go and without hesitation, working on personally my insecurities around being lesser than as a woman in the industry. I think I'm pretty good at that, but there's definitely some that will like creep up where I feel like my voice is stifled because of my concerns. That's my own personal work. And I think also raising people up and not letting others talk badly about the way somebody is dressed on the stage, how they said a word from the stage. Like being in the audience, I think for me is where I would probably make a little bit more impact about like raising up other people and shutting it down when I hear anything outside of that. I think that's me personally.
Yeah, that I agree that supporting others and helping, bring everyone up where we're not just scrambling and fighting to the top for ourselves. But when we talk about maintaining our integrity, I mean, I think that includes taking sponsorship from products that we believe in, only products that we believe in, not just whoever's going to pay us. I think that's a big one. I think, not keeping quiet. I think disrupting those conversations, like Michelle said, if somebody makes a comment about how someone else is not dressed professionally or maybe they're not qualified, that we disrupt that conversation. We don't add to it. We don't let ourselves get dragged down into that gossip of judging each other. Because again, I think that comes from trying to scramble over everybody else to get to the top, that there's abundance. We all have knowledge. We all have important things to say. We're all going to learn from each other. And by living in a scarcity mindset, we're depriving ourselves of other people's voices.
I also think that we all have an opportunity to lift up the next person, whether it's through podcasts, whether it's through our individual companies that we work with. All of us, I think, are in a situation where we're actually hiring KOLs. Like we can have that direct impact and be open and actively looking for people that are not the mainstream, not the person that you're always going to see on stage for things. We have that responsibility. We could easily do that.
Yeah, and that brings amazing amounts of joy. I had a couple of years ago, it was probably 3 years ago, a KOL walked into the booth and she's like, I don't know. I'm going to say her name. I'm going to blast her name because she's amazing. Amber Lovatos walked into the booth, fairly unknown, from Texas. She was very active in her local component and the state component. And she said, I speak on teledentistry and I'd love to speak for you. And I got to know her and she started speaking for us and she was amazing. And watching her grow and get a larger and larger audience and then really come into her own. And now she, her handle is the Latina RDH, and watching that content explode, like that's way more exciting to me than standing on a stage and speaking. And watching her spread a message that has not been widely spread before has been so exciting.
I just want to add before Jasmin voices hers, because I feel like also as influencers and people with a voice at our platform is talking about our own personal work too, because as much as I don't agree with some of the people before us not letting us in the door, like we had to fight, I also can understand that scarcity mindset of like, you didn't work as hard as I did. Like I'm still here and I don't want to be pushed out. And now I have to, it's scary. It's uncomfortable. And I can understand it and empathize with it. I have had it, even though I do feel like I come from an abundance mindset most of the time. When somebody does present them, because we were taught that, right? We've been conditioned to react this way. I still have it, and I have to check myself and be like, there is plenty of room. And if more of us are talking about it, the better. That actually helps me. But I have to mentally get in that space, because there is a knee-jerk reaction I have that this is mine. What are you doing? This is mine. If you take it, then what do I have? I don't have anything. As if there's only one thing out there, right? And I think talking about it and telling people that this is something that it's normal because we've been conditioned and we're trying to actively make the change. I think as influencers, having these tough conversations about our journey and how we're going to change and how we're going to affect change, and please check me if you see me acting like that or coming from a scarcity mindset. Like, I think that that's huge too, like being role examples for change.
I would say that for those of you who are working with companies, keep in mind that you want to remain with companies that emulate the same sort of values that you have. And don't be afraid to say no to relationships with companies that are not upholding that same standard. I think if we start requiring that of the companies that we work with, and everyone was showing up that way and not just accepting whatever it is that they give, they would have no choice but to change. I think what is disheartening for me, especially now that I do a lot of my work, 99% of my work is outside of dentistry, is hearing how high the compensation is for individuals outside of dentistry who come and speak at these larger conferences. That to me hurts when I know that this RDH speakers that are speaking at some of these larger conferences are only getting $300, $400, maybe. And these companies are paying people who could care less about dentistry, who haven't done a lick of research, $25K and beyond to speak. That to me breaks my heart. And if we had more, I understand exactly what Michelle was saying, but if we had more of that money into our KOLs, we would not have that mentality of, oh, I'm scared of somebody's coming up here. Do you get what I'm saying?
Fact too.
So
yes.
If we're not valued as a whole, how is it that we're going to see any sort of change like that, right?
No, that's exactly.
And this is why leadership training is so very necessary. We don't have enough of that really help us see the value and see how we can all show up in a way that creates change, the positive change that we need. So for me, when I was hosting my events, my people were extremely diverse. When I'm in rooms and I have opportunities where I have companies' ears, I am sharing the names of people who have diversity of thought, not just in ethnicity, but in thought. So that's the way that I have given back. There are mad people that was on the stage at a conference in July. Many of them started with me. And it feels so good to be in that situation. It feels so good to be in that situation, to be able to see so many people who you've helped get up on the stage and share their message.
I'm obsessed with this conversation. I feel like it could go on for days. And I want to have more of this conversation. So also, if we have listeners that want to talk about this kind of stuff, I think we should have this more often. these are the hotel lobby bar at conferences with a glass of wine. We do this every year. Conversations that I live for. Like this is what makes my heart just like go, oh my God, this is what living is about. These conversations to make change, and I don't know, hear other people's stories. Because I think that this is also, I mean, we get into a little bit of an echo chamber sometimes. And so having somebody say like, yeah, your point is correct, Michelle, but we have to also ask for more money. Like we need to be valued more as an industry so that we don't, because that's where the real root cause is in this whole situation, is that we're not valued as RDH KOLs.
Yeah. So how do you think companies that have done it right, because I've worked with some really awesome ones, how can other companies emulate them? I'll start the first case in point. I developed a really amazing relationship with one company. And I remember meeting one of their decision makers, and it was like, yeah, we listened to your podcast. And I'm like, what? For real? And they watched me for some time before, and we had lunch, and we got to know each other on a deep relationship level that it made so much sense for me to go to bat and be like, you need to go with this company, right? And there was a relationship that was built. I had never had a courtship like that ever from a company. Prior to that, there was a company that I had contracts with, and I had did several things with them, and for them, they ran out of money. I was never compensated as well as other KOLs. So this courting was perfect to show like what values was important to them. Not only are their products amazing, but they want to make sure that they have relationships with their KOLs and they're honest in their conversation. So I think that's a really great first step of taking away, kind of dusting off this facade of this mountainous, I am the god of dentistry, right? And really look at connecting with people on a human level.
I think Mouthwash is pretty good at it.
I know. Well,
I think Tepe is pretty good at it. I think I've only worked for companies that have been pretty good at it.
Yeah. And what's interesting about those two companies is that they really value hygienists, and they invest money in hygienists. They go to those hygiene shows. They're showing up and building relationships, like you said, Jasmin, with hygienists. But I have limited knowledge of specific companies and how they work with KOLs because I've worked with Mouthwash for the last 5 years. So I haven't worked with other companies. But that's a big one. Building relationships. Like we don't have a lot of KOLs, but those KOLs are family.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to definitely cultivate those relationships. And when you do have one, money is an issue for me. That's an insecurity for me. Like I don't like to talk about the business of anything because I just want to do it for the greater good. Right.
But I am
learning. Yeah. Oh, trust me. You are not the only person telling me that. Like if I actually were a dentist, I would be the brokest dentist alive. Like I'd have like operatories. I'd live in my office because I would not be able to afford rent and
your mobile van office. That's all you could afford.
In the mobile van. I'd be doing van life from my mobile dental van. And I know that, and I'm okay with it. I'm like, that doesn't like, that's not what lights me up, but I get it. Like I got bills to pay too, but I am now trying to be very respectful of people's budgets, but I think it's really a beautiful thing when I bring a topic to a company that might not have a dog in the fight in the sense of I'm promoting something from their line of products. And they say, that's fine. Like when we're connected to you and your great message, we rise too. And then they help me get to a place. I think there are companies out there that are doing that. And that is, that's, I think, a beautiful thing.
And let me just also add, for the companies out there that don't have the financial bandwidth to give a ton of money or monetary compensation, that's okay. Just don't come to the conversation like, well, we need you to promote our, X, Y, and Z product and do it all these multiple ways. And, as a give back, you get free product. No, I don't want that. Tell me how I can leverage the audience that you have so that way I can build a revenue stream in a different way that may not be through your budget. I think they need to come into the conversation of really looking at KOLs as their own businesses and respecting that and saying, hey, I may not have the budget right now to fully cover it, but what we can do is market you or, give you this other opportunity for exposure or connect you to someone that may be able to provide that for you. Like, we look for other ways to build value in our business. It's not just the monetary part. And I feel like if they come in with, I hate to say this. You ever seen no, I don't hate to say this. This is true. You ever seen a dog that is in heat and they're like humping all over the place? They're humping the pillow, the leg of a table, right? That's how some of y'all are coming to KOLs. Okay? And it's like, I get it. I understand you're in heat right now, but I need you to calm down and tell me specifically how you are going to benefit me. This is a two-way street. It is not a one-way street.
I think, I can't really piggyback off the analogies, but I'm going to go back to something else that you just said. Here's
funny, Andrew. You don't want to piggyback off that?
Look, no, that's not my thing. So, but here's the thing. I think, so we're talking about companies, but Jasmin, you had this point, and then earlier in the podcast, you said something that was I think really profound too, is if I can quickly just flip the mindset of, we're talking about KOLs, mostly speakers is kind of what we have been talking about as our topic, but there's so many other revenue streams. There's so many other things as your brand. And if you are out there and you're like, look, I want to be a KOL, but I maybe don't really know what it is. That's where the business coaching, you mentioned that also, you are a business, and that you're not an individual person with a message. You're a business. So you have to have someone guide you through the business part of things. And I think, we have a lot of people that naturally do a lot of great things. I think Michelle she's doing coaching and stuff now, but I don't think early on necessarily you had a lot of coaching, right? You just kind of muddled your way through it. Oh, I'm going to write, I'm going to speak, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But you didn't set up an LLC. You didn't, talk about compensation. You didn't talk about the value adds that outside of the money. What else can we, you didn't know that. And so kind of as we're kind of winding down, I also don't want that message to be lost of look, listener, you want to be a KOL, you got to find a coach. That's one of the first steps you should do. And, invest in yourself, invest in that opportunity.
You have to. And we're not used to investing in ourselves. We don't even want to buy our own instruments. People look at me with their eyes crossed because I, as a temp, would come in with my own instruments. I like sharp instruments, and I want to walk out with my hands not in a puddle of stew. But it's true. I started my LLC in 2016. I got my first coach in 2017. My second one was in 2018. My 2018 coach got me to 6 figures. I'm back with her again as I am in the multiple 6 figures range and working towards my other goals. I couldn't have got there if I didn't get the assistance I needed to understand business acumen, which we do not have. Some of us don't even understand how a business of dental hygiene works in an office. How in the world are you going to be out there negotiating your value in exchange of that with other companies? So I think the hardest part, because for a time I was coaching and consulting with dental hygienists. And it was like pulling teeth, no pun intended, with getting, I want to make a whole bunch of money, but I don't want to spend it to even get the knowledge that you have. We have to change that mentality. No one that has been successful in this industry did not invest in a coach or a consultant at some point in time to get the help that they need. And if you want the shortcut, not technically a shortcut, if you want the path created for you with step by step, that's not going to come for free. Don't expect that from a mentor. Please don't. Don't come in, and also don't come into my DMs picking my brain. I will send you a consulting fee and a link for that because I understand the value I bring. And so please don't get in your feelings when that happens. You've got to understand that at the end of the day, if you want to start viewing yourself as a business, you've got to understand why some of us are out there charging for the information that we're sharing. And I do welcome DMs. I just want to make that clear. I welcome DMs, but I will send a link.
Don't ask, oh, can I have your PowerPoint? I want to talk on this topic.
So, Jasmin, I want to... Michelle, have you had people ask you that?
Y'all know that's happened in the world so many times.
Oh my goodness.
I would love this slide. Can I have that slide? Can I have your PowerPoint? Mm-hmm. No, babe.
That's, yeah.
Not. I want to see you rise, but not with my content.
That's intellectual property, y'all. That's shmoney.
Yep.
So, Jasmin, I want to talk just briefly, I know we're going way over, but about that word mentor, because that has come up so much over the last 5 years. And I feel like mentorship happens as an organic thing, but people are now saying, oh, will you be my mentor? Will you be my mentor? Or some KOLs have said, you can pay me to be your mentor. I'm like, that's not actually mentorship. Mentorship, in my opinion, happens organically, naturally. And a lot of times it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Whereas coaching, you pay for. And I hired my first coach in 2015 when I was just working 2 days a week. I was a stay-at-home mom, mostly. I was miserable. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I just knew I needed change. And this woman worked with me for a year, and I flipped my life completely upside down. And my life is so different. 6 years later, my life is unrecognizable from that first time that I hired a coach. So that's a coach. You pay them, they coach you through things. A mentor is somebody you work with. And tell me what you think about that mutually beneficial relationship, because that's how I have experienced mentorship.
Mentorship is someone that can encourage you over time. This is someone that you may not even speak to on a regular basis. And it is mutually beneficial. We have to understand that most of us are busy. Every single person that right now in this podcast is busy. We don't have time to meet weekly with someone to guide them for 60 minutes and beyond. So a lot of times the mentorship relationship, sometimes we think of it being someone that's reached this pinnacle level of success that's all the way at the top. Those are often the very hardest ones to build relationship with. What we need to start talking about is peer mentorship. Andrew has mentored me. Michelle has mentored me. Eden has mentored me. These are small conversations we've had over 5+ years of us sharing with one another. That's all a form of mentorship. What we should be looking for is sponsorship. When you have somebody speaking your name when you're not in the room, that brings you the opportunities that you desire. Not sponsorship from a company, but sponsors, people that understand. So if someone is saying implant maintenance, I'm going to say Michelle's name, right? If someone's selling teledentistry, I can say Michelle or Eden, right? So these are genuine relationships that we've built that can provide us the little bit of assistance that we need as we're growing. But you're not going to see a huge trajectory in your growth towards your goals unless you invest. Like you just said, your whole life was changed. Mentorship got me but so far. I needed to pay someone. And I've spent thousands of dollars, y'all. Just this year, I think I've spent close to $30,000.
Yeah.
That's a surprising number.
I don't even know.
You guys didn't have a look of shock on your guys' face, but I'm like, holy crap. That's a lot. That's a lot of investment.
I'm getting my money back in return from what I'm learning and what I'm gaining. And y'all gonna see. You watch. I said that I wanted to build my business outside of dentistry. Every single person that's going to be at my retreat is not in dentistry. And they paid me. Do you get what I'm saying?
Wow.
That is not something that could have happened if I didn't get the assistance.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I am so grateful for this entire conversation. I want to have more of it. I want to have these big conversations that move the needle forward for us. And hopefully it is the impetus for somebody to see the value that they have. And then they start saying, no, I listened to A Tale of Two Hygienists and I am worthy of bigger and better things. So thank you guys so much. And I do want everybody to stay tuned because there will be kind of a part 2 to this where we bring on 2 other KOLs in the space. And we just kind of continue this conversation with them. So thank you so very much for your insight and your powerful message today.
I just want to shout and give flowers to Andrew and Michelle, who has been in this game for mad long. Okay.
Yes.
Y'all
We're
have
gonna edit this part
continued.
out.
Yo, better not edit this out. Y'all have continued to show up. You have continued to show up with massive amount of integrity. And we need that. We need it. This, again, is such a huge part of your legacy because this is going to last for years to come. I mean, you really have changed the game when it comes to how we view just dentistry as a whole. So flowers to Michelle and Andrew. We know this is a labor of love.
Thank you.
Y'all are the real
Yes,
deal.
ma'am.
Y'all better not edit this out. We love you.
You guys
Thank
too.
you.
I love you guys a lot.